Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I'll be your host once again for today's show. Joining me this week is Chase Newcomer. Chase is out of Omaha, Nebraska. He works at a European specialty shop, and Chase reached out to me about a month or so ago. He was up here in Minnesota for his son's hockey tournament. We got together, had a couple drinks, some food, had a really good conversation, and so ended up having him on the show. Really cool guy, very well spoken, and we cover a lot of topics relating to the automotive world. So I enjoyed this talk quite a bit. Hopefully you will as well. But yeah, the prep time for not only class, but the shop time too, if you're going to bug vehicles, that's like an all-day project. If I'm going to set up several vehicles to be broken for the students, like I have to go in on a day when I'm not teaching to prepare them all and make sure that they're broken in the right way. Or like you just mentioned, the scan tool thing. Because, you know, we have to register the scan tools and update the software, fix all the equipment that students break. And we're maintaining a shop too, you know, the hoists and the transmission jacks and all the other equipment. If it breaks, like we either have to fix it ourselves or, you know, hire somebody out, but then does it work with our budget and how soon can it get fixed? So yeah, there is quite a bit behind the scenes that the students don't see that I didn't realize until I started doing it.
Oh yeah, there's always unforeseens, and it's crazy how much stuff they do. Like we had a Hunter digital alignment rack, just keeping that up to date. We had like snap-on tool cabinets on the walls, so we'd have like a cabinet of torque wrenches, a cabinet of wrenches, a cabinet of impacts, and things like that, and just making sure all that stuff's maintained, not broken. Fittings are there. Yeah. It's just crazy, you know, GM Tech 2 scan tools, so much.
We've been lucky, but I've talked to other instructors that have said the challenge is making sure that everything stays at the school, that it doesn't walk away. Because depending on where you're at and, you know, the students that are there, stuff is going to get legs pretty quick and walk out of there. Like I said, we've been, knock on wood, we've been pretty blessed with that. That not a whole lot has disappeared, but you got to inventory the stuff. Cause there's certain things that, are pretty easy to slip into a pocket or a toolbox. And then, okay, now we're down whatever that piece of equipment is. But nice part is we have a big inventory list that we have to use for ASE because they accredit our program and we have to have certain tools. And so we created an inventory list to make sure, okay, we have all these things that are required, and it does make it easy to go through and just kind of check everything off, make sure everything's there and functional.
Oh yeah. It's nice when you can walk in and somebody's done that. Yeah. We had a scan tool room and we'd go in there and there was just the organizational aspect of it. Like, those snap-on cabinets were glass front, and the tools hung in them, so you had a quick visual inspection. And then the scan tool room, everything was in a cubby, and if it was missing, you knew exactly which tool it was. And they did a lot of prep work to get that going, and it was awesome.
And you're from Nebraska. Did you go to tech school out there?
Yeah, I'm in Omaha, so right across the river, we got Council Bluffs. There's a school called Iowa Western Community College, and they have an automotive technology program that is a 2-year associate's program. And you get to do an internship. So I worked full-time while going to school there at Lexus of Omaha. And it was interesting. You got the school classroom education, and then you'd go and get handed some light tickets, ended up flagging hours under it was a mentorship program, I guess. So I had a master tech that led our team. We had 6 teams, I think, at that dealership. And there was 4 teams of 6 people. And I would work with 2 teams. We had like 4 11-hour shifts, and I'd show up for those, and I'd work every Saturday, and then I'd have classroom on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it was Monday through Saturday. It was a lot of work, but it was nice to be able to get paid while you're doing the schooling.
Yep.
Because I came in with some knowledge of measurements. My grandpa was a machinist for the phone company here in Omaha. He built, he repaired like telephone cabinet building equipment and stuff like that. So he taught me how to measure things with like micrometers and calipers and basic stuff. But when it came to the cars, we relied on them too much to break them ourselves. So we outsourced our automotive repair for the most part. We have a local chain, Jensen. I don't know if they're local, if they're nationwide, but Jensen Tire and Auto, they serviced all of our stuff for a long time. And it's interesting. I had a 97 Eclipse that I took to Jensen to get an oil change looked at, and they ended up putting struts on it. It seems to be a common thing. Everything gets struts, but it's got an oil leak. They diagnosed it as a head gasket, and I looked it up. I remember printing off a bunch of papers at school. I was going to college, and I'm like, Grandpa, we need to pull the head off of this. We can do it. It's real easy. It's just a 4-cylinder.
Yeah.
He's like, nope, that's going to the dealership. Yeah. So we took it to the dealership. They did the head gasket. At this time, it was an Infiniti Mitsubishi conglomerate.
Okay.
And so they did the head gasket, and knowing now, I haven't had experience at this point working on anything, but at some point, one of the ground straps for the spark plug popped off in cylinder 3.
Okay.
And so it starts misfiring. It's setting, so the plug would get on top of the piston, the electrode. It would hit the head. It set off the knock sensor, disable that cylinder. And so it'd run on 3. I shut it off, started back up. I could go again for like 2 or 3 miles. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. I just know I'm late for class. So I'm driving, and I'm like, it's so bad now. I can't even do anything. So I pull over, and there's a Firestone right by the college, and I pull in. The guy's like, we'll look at it. And I'm sure he scanned it, at this point I'm still uneducated. So he scans it, and he's like, well, I found your problem. And he pulls that spark plug, and I know what a plug looks like. I'm like, that doesn't look good. He's like, no, the ground strap's embedded in the aluminum piston.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, oh, no. He's like, I don't know how bad the damage is. I'm like, well, I just had a head gasket done. Do you think it could be related? He's like, maybe. So my thought process is like, what do I do? So I took it back to Infiniti, and they quoted out an engine. I'm like, we're not putting an engine in this thing. You want like $7,000 on a $3,000 car. Yeah. So I found that the tip of the ground strap of the spark plug was bouncing around. So it was loose. It wasn't embedded in the piston.
Oh.
So we took the spark plug out, and we took a long air gun and a vacuum. So we had the vacuum running at the top of the plug hole, and we put air in it, and it took a second. We're waiting to hear, like, how will we know that we got it out? Like, how will we know? And after a couple minutes of doing this, like swirling the wand around trying to get it, you heard it right down the hose. It's like, no way, it came out. And so Infiniti had quoted out an engine because of cylinder bore scoring, like damage to the cylinder wall. And
sure.
I'm like, this thing's dead to the world, it's going to die. So I drove it another 40,000 miles. Just kept oil in it, and
nice.
It was a great car, but yeah, first manual car. It was a good time, but
those were popular cars. I mean, even even in recent years, I remember people kind of seeking those things out, those 90s Eclipses, especially if they had the all-wheel drive and all that stuff. But I've had a couple of scenarios where things have made their way into combustion chambers, and that's always an interesting event. Actually, one of them was on a Mitsubishi. It was a V6, and I don't remember why I was taking the intake manifold off. And the way they had it, there were studs that came up from the cylinder head and went through the intake manifold. And then you had, whatever reason they decided to do this, because this was factory, there was like 4 or 5 washers and then a nut on top. And so I was disassembling and I missed one of the washers. I didn't take all of them off. And so while I'm taking the intake manifold actually off of the engine, this washer falls down. And of course, it happens to fall right into the intake port where the intake valve is open and goes right into the cylinder. I'm like, oh, come on. So now this thing's trapped down in there. And same idea. I think I did it with a magnet in the spark plug opening and then an air gun to move it around, because I couldn't just grab it with the magnet because of the angle of the spark plug. But I finally got it doing that, and that was such a pain. We had a student in class actually lose a Schrader valve from a compression gauge in a cylinder. Oh, it wasn't tightened up, and so this thing's down in there. And as it turns out, I don't know exactly what metal it's made out of, these Schrader valves, but it's not magnetic. So we couldn't, I don't know if it was like brass or something like that. And we couldn't grab it with a magnet. And so what we ended up doing, this was actually a student's idea, is a Vietnamese guy who, super, super smart guy. He used to work on like heavy equipment over in Vietnam. Anyways, so we took a vacuum hose that fit down into the spark plug opening, and we created a bunch of adapters and hooked it up to the shop vac. And it actually worked. We had to fish around for it with this vacuum hose, but we got the Schrader and we pulled it up out of the spark plug opening.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, with the non-metallic aspect of it, that's the worst. Or not the non-magnetic aspect.
Right.
You know, it's right. Like, what do? You got to get something sticky, or you got to get it to move on its own. Like bubble gum on a stick. That's awesome. Yeah, that's never fun, you know. Always tape up the intake ducts. I don't like the rag in the intake duct thing. I can't remember. The Audi misfired.
Yeah.
It's like, I've seen that so many times where they have that split intake. The intake runner has a wedge at the end of it where it splits the airflow into the left and right intake valve area. And rags will just be like a paper towel or whatever will just be embedded onto that piece, just wrapped around it perfectly. And it's been there so long and there's been so much moisture content that it's like petrified. It's just like a little rock of paper towel. It's like,
no kidding.
I've seen that a few times on Volkswagen products. I don't know who is doing it around here, but seems like when they go to do the valve cleanings, those paper towels get forgot a lot.
Gotcha.
So that's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny the problems that we create for ourselves or other people create for us. The man-made stuff is always the strangest. You never know. It doesn't make sense until you see, you know, what it is that's actually causing the problem, because you'd never think that could happen unless somebody was in there messing around.
Yeah, we spend so much time analyzing waveforms, analyzing like the pulse sensors or whatever, and you're like, this is how this should look, and then this is an intake valve failure, this is something, and then it's like, this is something that nobody's thought of. Like, you don't know what this looks like on a graph because nobody's, you know, seen it and graphed it, right?
Yep.
It's like, how do you, the human variable is just outstanding. And those are some of the funnest diagnostics, you know, because it's, I don't know. I like it when there's a challenge and, you know, somebody's been in there before. Like, when I was up in Minnesota, did I tell you about the GL that I had?
I don't think so.
So, guy brought it in, and it's a no start condition at this point. He's like, yeah, I was chasing a misfire. It's like, what did you do to it? Because it was stone dead when I got it, and they had to tow it in. And he's like, I did an intake manifold, and while I was in there, I did plugs and coils and injectors. I'm like, holy cow! Like, that's a lot of stuff. He's like, yeah, it cranked 3 times, and then it never cranked again. I'm like, that's odd. Like, you got 3 cranks, a no start. So I get in it. Battery. I put one of our batteries in it. I'd start his on the charger because it was like 2 years old, and I get in it. Every single fuse in the car had been replaced, and not with a nice one. They were like cheap Chinese little fuses. I'm like, I have no idea what happened. And the only thing that's in my mind is like, this thing got jump started backwards. That's has to be what's happened here, because who puts every single fuse in the car as a hope. So I scope the CAN bus for the powertrain's down. I can't talk to anything. I start unplugging. Mercedes has those star connectors, or that I think that's what Chrysler calls them. They have a CAN. They have the powertrain, the chassis, and I think they have 5 different connectors that you can just unplug each module. So they all come to a central location, which is awesome. I can't talk to the transmission. I can't talk to the EIS. I can't talk to PCM. So I start unplugging the connectors, and I finally get a waveform. I'm like, cool. Now I got to figure out what that goes to, because they're not specifically labeled, you know. So long story short, his EIS isn't communicating, or is taking down the CAN bus because the remote start system that he had just installed is shorted. I get that taken care of. I still can't talk to the transmission. It scopes out like the CAN resistance was like 52,000 or something like that.
Okay.
Like, that's no good.
A little off.
And that threw me for a loop, because I saw like 52 and I'm like, that's close to 60. And then I was disregarding that
the K.
The K. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's significantly more than I want it to be. And then, so we ended up having to put a valve body in it. And then the shifter on the side of it, he had bought a used shifter because he thought that was the problem. And it was like a third party reflashed thing. And he's like, I bench tested the ECU. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But this piece is trash. It doesn't talk either. So it gets a factory ISM shifter module. And after all that, I get all my communication back. PCM's good. Crank no start. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This is terrible. I pull the fuel, I go to the fuel rail, no fuel pressure. So at the end of the day, like, he may have been fighting a fuel pump this entire time, but this thing just got a valve body, an ISM. The thing that threw me for the biggest left field hit for this thing was like, he goes, I bench tested the ECM. And here I am. I don't have Altels. I have Autologic scan tools. And so we don't bench test things. Like, we can't. I guess I could now that I played with it. I could provide power, provide ground, connect to the CAN, and talk to a PCM at a circuit. I could try that. But he has the IM608, the one that does keys. And he's like, I bench tested the ECU. And going into this, I'm like, if you're bench testing the ECU and you think I'm going to fix it in 15 minutes, like, this is going to be fun, but it's not going to be fast. Like, this is going to hurt. Right. And we went through it. He was cool with everything. And at the end of the day, we got it running. The things hasn't ran. Check the oil level, check all this stuff, make sure everything's good. And then this particular generation of Mercedes has the idler bearing gear for the chiming chain can be soft in an 07, and it'll wear the teeth down, and you get camshaft correlation codes for the passenger side bank, and that's like the death knell for a V6. This is a V8, so it's not as bad of a deal because it's not a balance shaft, it's just an idler. But I'm like, well, it's running, but I don't know how long this engine's gonna last. I'm like, I'm sorry, but yeah, that was a treat. It's just, those are fun. You don't know what's going to happen, but that human variable, it's like, who replaces every single fuse? That's a bad sign. So, yeah. That's
That is a Hail Mary play for sure. We're just gonna put all the fuses in here, and then you don't even know, are there fuses missing at that point? Did all of them end up back in the right place?
Yeah. I learned that lesson I had an X5 right when I got into the European repair. I had an X5 that I was looking at the fuse box, and I thought it was going to be trying to get this thing running. I thought it was going to be the guy just, this needs a fuse, this needs a fuse. I pop a fuse in it, and then I lose the transfer case. And I have no idea what's happened. I'm like, I just checked the fuses. Now it doesn't move. Like, it won't go into drive, won't do anything. It's like transfer case neutral. Well, I didn't know this, but BMW has, you put a 5 amp fuse in an empty spot, and I'm not sure exactly. I need to look it up. This is years ago. It sends power to something, and it neutrals out the transfer case. So you can tow it. So
that's by design. Okay.
Yeah. So my boss is like, what's the last thing you did? I'm like, I checked the fuses. He's like, did you take any out or put any in? I said, I added this one. He's like, take it back out. Took it out, shifted. I'm like, that's magical. But yeah.
Yeah, I've always wondered the thought process, because I'll find that quite often where there's just a fuse missing. It's just gone. And that car ended up at a shop somehow. And I'm like, who took it out? And obviously created this problem. Maybe they were trying to fix something else, but they created a problem and then just didn't put it back in. Like, I mean, even if you don't know a whole lot about cars, like, if you take it out and now you have an issue, like, why just throw it away? But it happens enough. So
it does. And it's like like what you said, what was the thought process? Okay, I did this thing and this happened. Undo the thing. No. That's not an option. I have to leave that the way it was. That fuse was bad. We had that with a CAS, central electronic system or comfort. I don't know. It's BMW. And it relates to the door handles. We had a no start or no keyless entry. And I go to the thing. I'm like, there's supposed to be a 5 amp fuse here. Like, test the 76. He's like, 75 or 77? I'm like, no, 76. He's like, well, there is no 76. I said there should be. Like, according to this diagram, there should be. So, yeah, pop that fuse in. Everything kicked off. Now, I think one of the comfort access handles was shorted out in the driver's side. So it would get, like, we use a flare for diagnostics sometimes. You know, we got a drain or whatever. It kept shorting out. That handle would get hot. Like, it would heat up on the car. Kidding. So it'd be like, the car would be like blue and the handle would just be like red. I'm like, oh, that's a problem.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that was a fun one.
So you're at a European specialty shop, is that correct?
Yeah, sorry. We're at, I'm at Star Class Motors in Papillion, Nebraska. It's like metropolitan area, you know, just south of Omaha. And Mark Bertelsen, the owner, he started with, Mercedes. He was a trained Mercedes tech back in 80s and 90s, and he decided he was going to do his own thing. And started a shop, can't remember, 2000. And he's been going at it by himself for the most part in the beginning, and then he branched out, got a couple techs, and it's grown. It's pretty nice. Now we have a lot of real estate. We have like 5 buildings. We have a detail shop. We got a front shop with 4 racks. We got a back shop with 4 racks. And there's a lot of space for how many techs are there. We have 5 active technicians, the owner, and then a service writer, and a couple other people that come in and, you know, do like accounting and stuff. But it's been cool. Before I worked there, I worked at a certified transmission manufacturing facility, and I was a rebuilder. And like, I got 1,000 units under my belt, and I'm like, this is the same puzzle over and over, you know?
Sure.
I just got kind of bored. Well, my dad was a locksmith, and he's at the shop. He's putting a key in an Audi or something, and Mark, he's persistent. He is persistent. He tells my dad, he goes, I need a technician. Do you know anybody? And my dad's, the only guy I know is my son. He's like, what does he do? He's trained. I got ASE master certified and all that. Probably a disgrace to that title when I first started, but I got it anyway. You know, you don't need any experience. So my dad's in there making keys. Mark calls him and calls him and calls him. And my dad's like, he calls me up. He's like, hey, I made a mistake. I called this guy and he won't stop blowing my phone up because he hasn't talked to you yet. I'm like, all right, I'll give him a call. At this point, I'm kind of fed up with certified and rebuilding transmissions because it's just dirty and hot, and being covered in transmission fluid's the worst, especially baked transmission fluid. Like,
oh yeah.
I rebuilt Chrysler units and they would always come in. Somebody gets stuck. They'd do a 150 mile an hour peel on the side of the road. They'd blow the diff pin through the case and the whole thing was burnt. I'm like, this is terrible. So I call Mark and he's like, what do you do? I said, well, I work on cars, I rebuild transmissions right now, but I want to be diagnostics. He's like, I'm looking for a diagnostic tech. I'm like, that sounds awesome. So I, limited experience, but I'm like, I'm going to do this. So I go to the shop and the first job, he's like, here's a wheel bearing. I'm like, this isn't diagnostic. This is a wheel bearing. And he's got the slide hammer bearing puller, and I'm just out of my element. I think it took me the whole day to do the bearing. And at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I got the driver's side bearing done. He's like, driver's side? I'm like, no. He's like, the passenger side rear wheel bearing? I'm like, no, that's not what happened. It's a great first day. And it was just, why did that happen? But it did. We got along, we get along pretty good. I'm electrically inclined and he's mechanically inclined. And so we meet in the middle on a lot of projects.
Gotcha.
But on a lot of projects, it's like a little bit of a butting of heads. But
different
at the end
mindsets.
of the day, yeah. And I do things my way. I read manuals. He does things his way. He gets through the job. And at some points, it's a detriment to be one way and it's a detriment to be the other. Like if you're super ingrained like I am, like it has to be done this way. It has to be done by the book. I have to learn the system, like our tire bouncer. I found out what tire bouncer we had and I went home and I downloaded the manual on my iPhone and I'm reading through the manual, finding out how to calibrate it. I'm like, this is unhealthy. He just runs the thing. And so, I get caught up in the details of how to do it correctly, but he gets through the job. So I'm horribly, horribly slow at some things and he is quick. And there's a unison, there's the teamwork that we acquire through that difference of mindsets is what gives us the ability to do what we do. Cause we do anything from engine teardowns to, parasitic drains or, it's awesome. We have a wide scope of ability and we all work together and do a lot of things that other people just hadn't gotten done. And it's neat. It's a cool shop. I enjoy being there.
How was it for you jumping into the European world where, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but your prior experience was mostly Lexus? Is that?
Yeah. So before that, tech school, Lexus, certified transmission, and then I'm just like, oh, I'm going to be a European diagnostic tech. Yeah, no, that was blindsided. So at the time when I got hired, the only thing I had done, I had a 95 BMW with a 5-speed that I autocrossed. It had 340,000 on it. I'm like, oh, I like BMWs. I bought a 540i 6-speed with a blown engine. And they had the tools at Star Class. And so I'm like, I'm going to do this. But in learning all that, it's like, wow, I have no idea how to diagnose a European car. And so I walk in the shop and he's got the Autologic Blue Box, which for European at the time, back in like 2015, was like,
that's the tool.
It was still good. Yeah. Autologic hadn't gone through their roller coaster ride of ownership and all that stuff yet. So like, I remember there was one guy that I'd call it Autologic for programming and stuff. His name was Dennis. He did all the Mercedes stuff, which is our main line. We're mainly a Mercedes shop, but would do anything from European. And I'd be going through something. I'm like, I'm stuck. And he's like, yeah, I know. Check this wire. Check this wire. All right. You got power? Okay. Check this relay. Okay. That relay's bad. I'm like, I'm in over my head. He's like, I know. But he was so good. He was a lot of fun to work with. And he helped us out a lot. But that tech support line, I try not to use it until I've exhausted all my resources. Like, I'm going to put in my best effort before I throw this hook.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, sorry.
Oh, the tech support thing. When I was a tech, I'd use the Identifix hotline every once in a while, but same thing. I try to make it my absolute last resort. And honestly, sometimes just thinking about making that call would bring me back to check something else, because I'm like, okay, if I talk to this guy, he's going to ask me A, B, and C right off the bat. I know he is. He's going to have me check, the charging system and check, go through the basics. And I'm like, did I really go through these well enough to answer those questions? Because I know they're coming. So I go back, and a lot of the times I ended up finding the problem because I skipped over something. I didn't look at something enough. And so just the thought process of what's this guy going to ask me? And that would prevent me from having to make the call sometimes. But it's good to have somebody in your back pocket. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. 100% on with that. And it's funny. Mark is the guy. I got a BMW and I have no idea what's going on. Calls him right away. And so it's like he's going through those initial diagnostic processes every time with him. And so he asked me to make the call, and I'm like, I'm not making the call. I do not want to be called out on incompetence on this deal. So it's cool. Though that team's been great for the European stuff. And it's hard. Like, there's not a huge amount of people that I can talk to. I'm trying to network more in Omaha, but it's like, okay, you do diagnostics. Cool. Yeah, I work at a Chevy dealership. I'm like, so you have absolutely zero compatibility. Our waveforms look similar and our engines operate with the same air and same fuel, but like, as far as wire diagrams, how the systems work, they're so different. And like, I don't understand a lot of the domestic stuff. And I guess I look at everything like a European car, and I'm just like, oh, this is going to be complicated. And somebody's like, well, there's just a switch on the door jamb for that dome light. I'm like, it's not ran through a central body processing module. There's not a door control module sending a status alert over the CAN bus to the body control module to the central junction systems to turn that dome light on. There's no overhead control panel. It's like, it's a switch at the door jamb. I'm like, it provides the light ground. I'm like, that's insane. But yeah.
Yeah, it's all about what you're used to. And if you're used to European, then yeah, the domestic stuff is going to be different. It's going to be weird. And that's, I think, well, most guys like myself, Ford and GM and Chrysler were my everyday bread and butter for many, many years as a tech, and the wiring diagrams and the way the service info is set up and the way the vehicles are structured. And then, so yeah, you get something like a European car and it all seems backwards. And the track wiring diagrams are like trying to read Japanese. But if you actually take the time to look at it, you're like, oh, okay, this actually does make sense. They're just approaching it a different way. And you can figure this stuff out. But like you said, you got to sit down and you have to take the time to learn. You need to make that time. And that's where the mindset of just like, go, I'm just going to jump into it and try to figure it out. I know that for myself, that's where I'll fall short. And it's worth the time to sit back and spend a half hour reading, taking in service information, and it'll set you up better for success with the car.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Learning how systems work. EVAP system. What is a DMTL pump? I have no idea what a DMTL pump even is. Where is it? The first time you get a BMW, and then you look at it and it's only 4 pins. Like, how much can actually be going on in that little box? And it changed a lot of those out. But just understanding the systems. I think that's where tech school helped a lot. Was like, I was 21 when I started tech school, and I had no experience with the automotive world. Like, I no experience. I drove the car, I took it to the shop, they fixed it, and going through the tech school, you learn this is how this system works, and you go through, you break down, okay, hydraulic system, this is how the brake pedal gets mechanical advantage over the hydraulics, and this is how the hydraulic pressure is transferred through an ABS block to a wheel cylinder or whatever, and you break it down, but it's like you understand it, then you can diagnose it. But more and more, more systems, more cars, and everything works just a little bit different. It's like sometimes I just don't have time to, I know how this works on a Mercedes, but it's just a little bit different on this car, and I need to get it done. Yeah, I guess that's another area where you fall back on the tech crew. But yeah, system analysis, system design, just understanding that, being able to find that information. And we do Identifix and all data. And if we need to, we'll buy a factory service subscription if we get that stumped. But yeah, having everything like that, like I listen to your show and people are like, yeah, we only have Mitchell. I'm like, whew, I can't imagine only having one service information outlet.
There's always that time where it's got something that's wrong or missing, and hopping over to that other one. Oh, okay, they have it here. I think if you have 2 or 3 of them, you're almost guaranteed to get your info, unless it's a newer Volvo. I found there's like nothing for wiring diagrams 16 and up.
Oh, really?
Apparently it's all within the tool, and that's the only way to get it is to subscribe to their tool setup. Because I was working on one, and all 3 systems, no wiring diagrams. And I already told this guy to take a look at his window motor, and it turned out it was just a broken wire in a door jamb. So I just jumped in. I was like, I'll try to do this without a diagram. And I was lucky on that one. But yeah, so now if I get a newer Volvo, I'm happy to turn it away.
Yeah. I do not like, we get a couple Volvos in, but for most part, they're just service. They're new enough that they're not horribly, horribly broken. One of my techs I work with right now has an XC90, and it's got, somebody's going to hear this and they're just going to laugh because I'm overlooking something. But there's like he drives it for like 15 minutes and then it falls on its face. And so I took it out and got him to bring it to work. We're driving around. I got the fuel gauge on it. I'm laying in the back seat over the fuel pump with a power probe, just like trying to see what's going on. Like, I don't understand. It runs, and then it dies, and then it throws the weird. There's intuitive codes and there's non-intuitive codes, and it's like fuel pressure sensor message is erroneous or whatever. I'm like, okay, so you go after the fuel pressure sensor. No, that's not it. Everything in that fuel pressure system, that fuel pump system, if anything doesn't work, that's the code it throws. It's like fuel pressure signal. It's like, this is dumb. So I put my gauge on it. I read, he's got a questionable origin Vita laptop.
Gotcha.
And we're looking at it and it's like, it's registering 100 millibar, or I think 100 millibar more than my gauge is. That's got to be the problem. The sensor's reading wrong. Oh, no. Vita uses actual pressure, right? So it's not referenced to atmosphere.
Sure.
It's like, so that threw me for a loop. So we had actually swapped out. He's tried 3 pumps. He's tried 2 fuel pump control modules, 3 relays. He's done the sensors. He's done a rail. It's like, what could it possibly be? And so I think it's pulse width modulated ground. And the only thing I can think of right now is that I overlooked when the problem was happening, where it would go from 40% duty cycle to 80% duty cycle. The ground would go full on. I think the power's dropping out. And I don't know why. Haven't figured it out yet. But I don't get a lot of time to do side jobs. And so it's like, we're going to work on it this Friday. And I hope we can figure it out. But
okay,
it's just like, there's just a lot of things going on in that thing. And he's replaced a lot of parts. It's like,
yeah,
how is this still not working? And he's like, this has been going on since I've owned it for 2 years or whatever. I'm like, that's nuts. But yeah, Volvo. No Volvo.
Yeah, it's I've been getting sucked into more Europeans lately. I had a Mini the other day, and actually a Porsche I can count on one hand how many Porsches I've worked on. But this one actually, I was surprised to find out because I had no idea. It was a '04 Cayenne, and it actually is just an Audi Q7, like rebadged. And so as soon as I got into it, I'd actually worked on several Audi Q7 or what's the Volkswagen version?
Touareg?
Yeah. And I've worked on some of those, and it just happened to be one of the same issues on those where the wiring under the carpet on the driver's side gets all full of water and corrodes out. And so I actually knew, because I'd been down that road several times before, as soon as I realized, like, okay, I recognize these diagrams. Like, I recognize it's the relay under the driver's seat. And I was like, okay, I know where I'm headed with this, and it actually turned out pretty good. But yeah, so I decided to charge more for European diagnostics though a while back, just because I knew anytime I was getting into them, it's going to involve a little bit more prep time and a little bit more effort on my part to figure it out. And people don't seem to care though. They're happy to pay.
Yeah. Trophy cars, you know.
Yeah. You got to pay to play.
Oh yeah. No, I remember the first time I worked at Star Class for 2 years. I went to the Porsche dealership for 2 years, and then I came back because dealership management's terrible. Like,
definitely can be.
It seems like around here, like if you're pushing yourself to excel and you want it. Like when I was at Porsche, I got my PPN login, and so you take a bunch of tests, like prerequisites for bronze and all that stuff. And I'm staying up till 2 a.m. reading technical information about like GT3s, like what's the metallurgy difference between the GT3 connecting rods and all this stuff. And I'm slogging it just 2 a.m. every night, 2 weeks straight, getting all my prerequisites out of the way so I can go to class, because I want so badly to be. I don't know why. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. I just want so badly to be certified. I want that gold. I want that gold Porsche. If you get gold at Porsche, you get a watch.
Oh, no kidding.
Porsche. What's it? Porsche design chrono timepiece or whatever. Okay. And it's got your gold certificate and all that. And then they give you a plaque, and you get these medallions to put in the slots on the plaque. And I'm like, I want that so bad. I got the plaque, but I only got 2 things. But at the end of the day, you know, you come back from training, and the most important thing that I ever got from training was a renewed energy to do what I do.
Yes.
It was never what I learned there. I learned things. That's not what I'm trying to say. But the most important thing for me was, like, I was getting beat up at a dealership, trying to hit warranty times, getting grilled about output of hours and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I just want the car to run, or I want the car to be fixed. And so our team, we were all like that. We just want to fix the car, you know? We're having to write our own warranty paperwork. We're having to price out every single part that we need. Every time we do an oil change, we have to tell them exactly how much oil we put in the car. I'm like, don't you have a database? Like, don't you you have the same service information I do. Why do I have to tell you for the 357th time that car takes 9 liters? It's like, well, it's in quarts. I'm like, that's, you work for a European company. Anyway, yeah. But I'd go to training, and the personalities you meet, you know, ex-mechanics that have turned into technicians, and then you talk technical, and you get that outlet that you don't get in town here yet. I'm working on it. Where you can talk to like-minded individuals about problems with vehicles that you're passionate about. So I'd go out of town, I'd go to Atlanta, or I'd go to Pennsylvania, or go to California, and it was always just like a renewed energy. I'd come back and I'm in it. I want it, you know? Yep. And then a few months pass by, and you're just like, nobody here wants it. Nobody here. I can't say that. There's a couple people that had the energy, had the spark, but it's draining to be in that environment, you know?
Yep.
Where nobody They just want a number, and it's like I just want to fix a car. I want to be the best at fixing the car.
Yep.
Well, that doesn't work because you don't have the highest numbers in the shop. I'm like, you obviously don't understand it because I bailed 6 people out this week.
Yeah. That's I 100% agree with that point, that going to these training events, and even if you don't get blown away by the training and it doesn't, the information doesn't change your world, it's just going in that passionate atmosphere where everybody else is passionate about the same things you are. You just get a fire lit under you when you get back. And I remember feeling that at Firestone. The same thing you're referencing is where it's just a daily grind. You're just trying to hit those flat rate numbers. How many struts can you hang, and how many brake rotors can you get on, and tires? And it is so monotonous after a while, and you feel like a number. But yeah, going to training, and they would send us to training. They did an event where they sent us out to Colorado for a week, which is actually pretty cool. And I came back, and man, I was freaking ready to go. I wanted to take on any BMW or any weird car because I just spent the week doing it. And of course, I think the first car I got back was like a snow tire changeover. But you're just pumped up and ready to go. Whereas if you're just going through that same grind every single day, just slowly erodes away on you until you just, a lot of people just end up hating the industry and leaving. So it's so important to seek these things out. And then I think too, you start to build the networks and get to know people, and then it helps you, if not seek out, but identify other opportunities for yourself too, to realize like, oh, I don't have to do this thing that I hate. I don't have to work at this place that is, not suited for me. There's all these other options, or I have these people I can talk to now to try to find other opportunities. That was a big one for me, is just getting to know and seeing what other people are doing and being successful at. It was so eye-opening to launch me into trying to do stuff on my own.
Yeah, it's the networking is what I want to work on. I created a Facebook group like after we had dinner in Minnesota.
Oh, no kidding.
And I invited, so that instructor that moved to Metro, I invited him. One of the other guys I looked up to at Lexus, I invited, and but all the top guys in the shops that I had worked at, and I got like 9. It's not a lot, but it's like, these are people that I'd actually sit down and talk to. They're people that could actually maybe scratch that itch to talk about something more than brakes, more than struts. One guy's a Maserati guy, and Porsche and Maserati were next door to each other when I was at Porsche, and he had an F1 Quattroporte, Maserati Quattroporte with an F1 transmission. So it's the hydraulically shifted manual, and they were having pump problems, and we were trying to figure out he had the service information. I just didn't have a lot of time to like dive into it, but we're trying to figure out why the pressures weren't building right. I think somebody had quoted out an entire rebuild with a bunch of seals and a pump and everything, and it just totaled this vehicle out. It was like some ridiculous, like $15,000 repair or something. And this car was not the best shape, so you can get them pretty cheap if they're clapped out. So, but like that Maserati guy, I would sit down and talk to. One guy went from the Porsche shop to Bentley, and he's dabbled in like MacBook repair, like soldering, like doing that stuff. So I'm like, well, that's fascinating. I'd sit down and talk about MacBooks with you all day long. But I'm trying to gather that group of people where they have the passion, or I see, you just see that you could have a conversation with. There's a shop just north of here that I want to hit up. It's like Advanced Automotive Repair or something, and their Facebook presence kind of says diagnostic. They have it's the car with the wrench with the oscilloscope wave pattern.
Okay.
And I'm just like, maybe they know it, maybe they get it.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
So I'm gonna try to get up there sometime and reach out to that guy. I just don't know how open people. It seems like everybody around Omaha has this mentality that it's competition. It's like, I'll tell you whatever you need to know. one guy asked me about a Sprinter van. He's like, I did this, and it still doesn't work, and it's got one start remaining. I'm like, well, don't start it. That's going to be a problem because he doesn't have a way of resetting it. Gotcha. I said, what happened? He's like, the flex pipe broke. I said, okay, so it melted all that wiring along the floorboard. He's like, no, it's fine. I'm like, it's not fine. You need to open it up. He's like, I opened it up. It's fine. And I'm like, I'll come out. I need an eccentric shaft for a N55 that you have. So for a BMW, I'll buy that from you and I'll help you. We'll make a little trade here. I go underneath it and there's the insulation. There's like that fiberglass jacketing on the wiring. It doesn't melt. The wires inside melt together. And so I get under there and I just grab it and it's like sand. I'm just like, yep, that's no good. So he's like, oh, that's cool. Good job. I want to work on Sprinters. I'm like, you can have them. I'm a Mercedes tech, but I am not a Sprinter tech. That is a different breed. That's like a cross between a Dodge Cummins powertrain. I'm not saying it's a Cummins, but it's like, you got to have all the wherewithal to work on a diesel engine and a huge vehicle. And you have to have the European automotive diagnostic capabilities to work on the computer systems. And it's like, that's a bad combination, especially with the DEF system. Once they added DEF, I'm like, you can't fix the thing for under $10,000. And these people are buying them secondhand, rusted out. I'm going to run a paint business. I'm like, you're going to sink your entire profits of the year in that car. Like, that's a bad idea. I don't know if there's anything else out there, though.
Yeah, that size and that age, probably not. Those Sprinters, it's always a mess. It was funny, actually, there was an older Sprinter that the anti-theft module failed, and so it wouldn't start. I don't even think it would crank. It just said security warning on the dash, and this is an older one. And we actually ended up doing I went to the shop to diagnose it, and we did a capacitive discharge and got it to go again, and it recognized the key and started up. And I told him, I was like, well, it's running now, but I don't know how many times this is going to last. And so I was like, you get a security module and we'll figure it out. We'll get it programmed to the car. And so I never heard from him again. And then it was just like 2 weeks later, I get a call from a different shop that I service that's about, 10 miles from the first one. And they're like, hey, can you come look at this Sprinter van? It doesn't crank. I was like, oh, okay, sure. And I pull up and it's the exact same van at a different shop. I was like, I recognize it right away. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, I think I know where I'm headed with this one, and same issue, needed the security module. But that thing was, I actually should drive by there. The thing's been sitting there for 3 or 4 weeks now. I wonder if they're having trouble getting a module for it, which seems to be the case with a lot of stuff right now.
Yeah, we use WorldPack, so we get a lot of stuff through them, but engine mounts. I bought a GL 550. It was a good deal through the auction, I'm like, wow, I can get a nice car. Yeah, that was always a mistake. There's no such thing as a cheap Mercedes. Anyway, got it from the auction, paid a decent amount of money for it. I thought it was a good deal. Needed engine mounts. I called the dealership. Yeah, they're gone. I'm like, gone? Like, you don't have any? No. Not in the United States? No, not in Germany. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, that's a good sign. So the 550's the V8 twin turbo, and I'm like, okay, how about for an ML or for a GL63? They're like, we can put you on a wait list for those. We can probably get those. I'm like, cool. So it's like a uprated version. It's got a larger V8 twin turbo. Okay. And I'm like, okay, so the engine mount will be rated for more torque. Cool. So I wait about 2 or 3 weeks. I call the dealership. I'm like, hey, any update on this thing? They actually said they could get one. I wasn't on a wait list at this point. And they go, we put you on the wait list. I'm like, cool. So can you put me on the wait list? And at this point, it's my drive daily. So I'm just like babying it, trying not to launch the engine through the hood. And I call back another 2 weeks later. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, well, you're on the wait list. I'm like, am I on the wait list? They're like, well, the VIN you provided us the first call doesn't match the part number that you requested, so they actually won't send it to you. I'm like, And it's funny because I had actually confronted them about that when I ordered it. I'm like, that's not the part for this VIN. You understand? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, here's a VIN. This is off of eBay. Like, I went and found a listing for a GL63 2014 from eBay. I'm like, this is the VIN you're going to have to use.
Oh,
and they're
geez.
like, we're not using that. That's not your car. I'm like, okay, it's just a round and round thing. I found one engine mount in California. The right side never fails. It could fail, but it's not the common denominator in this one. So the only left-hand engine mount I found was in the United Arab Emirates. So I ordered that one, and I ordered one from California for the right side. The one from basically Dubai came in 3 days. The one from California took 2 weeks. I'm like, this is insane. How did they get it to me from the Middle East quicker than the one from California? Right. Maybe that says something about California's ability to move things, but I don't know.
Yeah. It was sitting in a box in California while your part was flying overhead.
Yeah. It was like they sent it on a slow boat from California. Yeah. That was interesting. But yeah, parts supply right now. Like, I feel bad for all the people working on the trucks and stuff, and like not able to get their cars in, not able to get the, salesman. My heart breaks for the salesman, because it's like, you've been grown and ingrained to work on this commission structure where you're going to get pounded if you don't hit it. No. Oh yeah, by the way, we can't get you any vehicles. It's like, what? That's not fair.
Right.
Yeah. So at Porsche, like, COVID hit, they were cutting hours, trying to keep the teams isolated, I guess. So half the salesmen would be there one day, and that doesn't work for a salesman. You can't be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because you work a deal on Monday, you work a deal on Tuesday, and you close on Wednesday.
Sure.
You can't do that. You're out. So yeah, that whole thing, just supply and demand. And then right after, this whole social distancing debacle that cut into everybody's livelihood is just terrible.
Yeah, for sure. Luckily, at least around here, the shops, the independent shops, have been very busy for the last year, and it's really good to see. Now they're struggling for technicians. Their problem is they don't have enough people to do the work, but it's been good to see that. I think it has to do with the cost and availability of new cars, like you're saying, is that people are looking, my parents just sold their '02 Chevy Silverado for like $5,800. I was like, what? You got what for that? And that's, so people are just fixing their old stuff, because it's like, I'm not buying a new car or used car right now. So the shops are just slammed.
Yeah, I felt like that was that injection of the COVID relief checks. Like,
yeah, there definitely was that right around the stimulus time. Everybody's in fixing that oil leak that they've been putting off for 2 years.
Yeah, 10. These are BMWs, you got to remember. So I had a guy drop off a 750 or 740 E38, so like a 97, 98 long door. It was a IL, so it was the limo version. He needed an oil pump. It was the weirdest thing. The bolts backed out of the back of the oil pump assembly, so it had no oil pressure. Told him, hey, you've ran it like this a little too long. Like, I don't feel consciously, like, ethically putting the oil pump in when I can see metal particulate. He's like, just do it. I'm like, okay, I'll put it in. He's like, while you're in there, do you think you could turbocharge it? It's like, what? This is the thing's had no oil pressure for who knows how long. You got lucky and the pump fixed it. But I put the bolts in the back of the pump. I didn't put a pump in it. I reassembled the pump, like Loctited the bolts in. It got oil pressure. And yeah, but then he's like, "Oh yeah, I got this COVID check. I want to turbocharge it." Like, this money's made people crazy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Just off the wall. So I have a question.
Yes.
I have a point in my, like, before I was an automotive tech, that got me triggered on electrical fixes. Do you have a car that turned you on to electrical? Do you have a story that, like, put you in that scenario?
That is a good question. where I would say it probably started. Well, I have a couple that really stand out in my mind. One of them was in tech school, and it was an old, I want to say, like a Plymouth Acclaim or something like that. Or no, it was a LeBaron, the convertible.
Oh no.
And it was a school car, and it was bugged by the instructors, and we were in our electrical course, and we had to basically there was, I think it was 3 or 4 electrical problems, and they were all pretty basic, open wires and things like that. But we had a set amount of time, and they just wanted to see our process and if we could identify all of them. And very few students identified all of them. Most would do 2 or 3. And I was in that crowd as well. I didn't, it wasn't, a crazy success for me or anything like that. But I remember that like standing out, like, I want to be better at this. Like, because the instructor showed us, well, here's this, here's that. This is how you figure this out. It's easy to, or not easy, but it's very possible to do within the time frame. And I just remember, like, I want to know more about that. And this electrical stuff does make sense. I think I can do it. And it definitely set me down that road. But I remember another one as a tech that really, it really beat me up. It was a Mitsubishi, some SUV or something like that. And it was just a turn signal issue. I think it ended up being the switch or something. And at this point, I was getting pretty confident with my electrical stuff. But the lady who brought this in, she is what the students would call a Karen. And I was pretty fresh, and she wanted to stand over me the whole time while I'm trying to figure out her electrical problem. And I remember I was so flustered by that I couldn't concentrate, and I didn't know what to do, and I lost all bearings of what I knew about electrical, and ended up making the wrong call because I was so worked up with having her standing over me, and she wasn't a nice person at all. And I made the wrong call, and we put the wrong part in, and she was even more upset. And I sat back, and I was like, because once we figured out what the actual problem was, I was like, this is easy. Like, I know this stuff. Like, I just need to focus on it and get better and more confident at this electrical stuff. And somebody can stand over me if they want, and I'll still do it. And again, after that, I buckled down, and I was like, I want to make sure that I can make this work regardless of the scenario or the pressure or whatever it is. And so I spent some time studying it, and it just was one of those things where it's got to play by a set of rules, right? And if you know the rules, you can win the game. That's really all it is. And it's almost like cheating once you know the rules, and it's got to be that way. And I like that, as opposed to like a suspension noise where, there's it doesn't quite work out that way. I suppose if you have an NVH or something like that, but electrical makes a lot of sense in my head. But again, because I spent the time to go over it, but it was kind of getting beat up on those cars that really sent me down the path of like, I need to be better at this.
Yeah, it's calculated. Everything was designed calculated, and everything should mostly be able to fit calculated. It's X isn't working, so here's your variables.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then you.
What about you? You got a car?
My grandma purchased new in 94 Chrysler Concorde. It was purple with a gray interior.
Okay.
And we rode in this thing for years, everywhere. My grandparents raised me. So this was the car I grew up in. It goes. And then one day they just stopped driving it. And my grandma goes out and buys a 2000 Toyota Solara convertible. She wanted a convertible. I'm like, cool. It's just me, grandma, and grandpa at this point. All the other grandkids have moved out. And she deserves what she wants. I think she put the top down on that thing one time ever, that Toyota. Anyway, I think it was on the test drive that we bought the car. So this 94 Chrysler Concorde sat out back. It was a 3.5, but it was longitudinally mounted. So
Sure.
It It was in there the right direction in my mind. You know, I like symmetry. If I can look at it and there's a left bank and a right bank and they look similar, that's mint. I like that. I don't know why, but engines in there sideways are wrong. So I'm in love with this car, and I drove it so much, I drove in it so much that I wanted to drive it, and it's just sitting in the back lot, just rotting away. I'm like, Grandpa, why is that car out there? And this is right when that Eclipse broke down. So the Eclipse broke down. I was driving a Ford F-250 V10 that he had for towing a trailer. It got like 8 miles a gallon. I'm like, I gotta get out of this. This sucks. I'm like, why don't we drive the Chrysler anymore? He's like, well, it blows heat all the time. You'll be driving down the road, and sometimes you can get it turned down, and then it'll just full blast, full defroster, 100 degrees on the hottest day in the summertime. And I'm like, well, that can't be too bad. I'm going to drive it. So I get it out. I clean up the interior because it's been sitting back there for so long, and I'm driving it, and then it happens. It's like middle of July, and I'm driving this thing. Defroster turns on full kilt, full fan, full heat, max defrost. It's 100 degrees outside. It's 150 at the vent. And I'm like, this is unbearable, but you can't turn it off. The AC head unit doesn't respond.
Okay.
And I'm curious. I'm like, is there any way we could fix this? Like, this is terrible. He's like, I don't know. So I start looking it up, and I find that's the generation where you can do a button dance on the AC head unit, and it displays a fault code. I don't remember the fault code. This is long before I cared about cars, but I hadn't touched any. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I think it said something like internal fault or something to that effect. And I'm like, what? Is there anything that could be wrong in the head unit? And my grandpa, being a machinist, he's like, well, the only thing I can think is that it might have bad solder joints. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? He's like, I'll show you. We'll go pull it out. So I'm on YouTube, figuring out how to pull this thing out of the dash. We get it out. We take it inside, and he busts out this 1970s Weller soldering iron station. And I'm like, it's a magical hot stick. I love it. What is that silver stuff? He's like, that's solder. I'm like, oh man. It's like, don't touch it and then eat because you'll get lead poisoning. I'm like, ooh, it's deadly. I love it. So we pull this AC head unit apart, the climate control head unit apart, and we look at it, and he's like, well, we should be able to see something's burnt up. And I'm like, I don't see anything's burnt up, but I don't know anything about soldering joints. But these over here are shiny, and these over here are like crusty, and they look like they're broken. He's like, oh yeah, those are cold solder joints. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, the terminal, the pin has broken away electronically from the surrounding board. And he showed me how the circuit board has the brass, the copper traces and the pads, and then the pin goes through. And I'm like, so what do we do? He's like, well, we'll reflow all these pieces. So we go on that board, and we don't know what's what, and we're just melting solder on everything. And they look horrendous. But nothing was touching each other. We made sure it was all clean. It was dirty, but it was clean. Put it back in the car, and for the first time in like 6 years, the thing had air conditioning. I'm like, nice. This is right uptown. I started driving that thing, and it was just like, it was that win, it was that high that you get. It's like, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like a superpower of, I can fix things with zero materials on some cases, and it's like that 80s, 90s era, like cold solder joints are rampant, and it's like, I can go in with a soldering iron, a nice roll of like Kester hyper-eutectic solder, and I can fix things, and I can restore things. And that was just so awesome. It took a car that's just been in the barn for years, in the back lot for years, and brought it back to the road. And that was powerful. But then I got to tech school, and this is where I learned never trust what the previous technician did. He had an MR2 turbo wide body, and I was like in awe of this car. I'm in tech school, we're at lab, and he's got a turbocharged 4-cylinder MR2. I'm like, this is awesome. And one day he brings it in, and it doesn't start. And when you put the key on, the wipers turn on and the lights flash and everything freaks out and the radio plays weird things. I'm like, this is odd. This is an electrical fault. And I looked at my instructor, Tom, and he's like, you want to be in this group? I'm like, because it wasn't my class. I was on break and there was 2 sessions, a morning session and an evening session. And so I'm like, yeah, I want to be in this group for a while. I want to work on this car. And the owner of it, I remember, so I switched sessions. I'm coming in the mornings before class and working on this car with these guys, a team of 2 or 3 guys. I asked the owner, did you check the fuses? He's like, yeah, I checked all of them. I'm like, oh, cool. Awesome. So this is a really weird problem. And the whole time, Tom's in the background watching us. And this goes on for days, like 2 or 3 days. So we're like finding powers and grounds. And we're finding power where we shouldn't have power. Where it's like backfeeding on a circuit. I'm like, something's touched together. Something's going crazy. And Tom's like, did he check the fuses? I'm like, I asked him. He said he checked the fuses. So we're going at it. We have the interior torn apart. And one day I get to class a little early. And Tom's like, did you check the fuses? I'm like, no, he checked the fuses. He's like, did you check the fuses? I said, no, I didn't, Tom. He's like, why don't you go check the fuses? And I go through it, and all the main fuses, the mini fuses, were intact, but the main alternator fuse was blown, the 150 amp or whatever. And so this is I wasn't testing for voltage. I was testing for the fuse, like the resistance, which
Gotcha.
I was beginner. I know. That alternator fuse was blown because he jump started it backwards, and that was information he just decided not to tell any of us. So we work on this thing for like 4 days. We put a alternator fuse in it, and Tom's like, that makes sense. Everything comes back online. The entire car's torn apart. I'm just like, that sucked. He's like, always check your fuses. He's like, and if somebody told you they check them again, because it's always a fuse. And I'm like, that works. Lesson learned. Wasted 4 days of my life on this car.
Oh, those are the ones that you don't forget. Those the ones that beat you up and ends up being something simple or stupid. And
oh, yeah.
You never forget that stuff.
No, it's fun. But, yeah. So, how's the mobile thing going? Do you get to do a lot of that in the afternoons right now?
Yeah, it's been pretty busy. February was a little bit slower. I think the automotive world in general slows down a little bit this time of year until tax season comes and the snow starts to melt. But it's been very busy and a good mix of programming and diagnostic stuff. I'd say it's a pretty even 50-50 split. So the programming, while that can definitely have its challenges. That's more, I do it for the income, I guess, because if everything goes smoothly, it can be pretty lucrative. But the diagnostic side of things, obviously you can charge well for that, but it's more of that, passion and interest that keeps me doing that and keeps me up for my classes and stuff like that. So I'll keep doing that stuff, and it's been good. Really educational to see this stuff, and keeps me grounded for class as well. Not only what I'm seeing, but what the students need to be prepared for and what's realistic. And, do we really need to spend, for instance, 45 minutes to an hour talking about like the message structure of CAN bus and this arbitration bit. And I'm like, well, you know what? Probably not. Like, I can mention a few things about it, but really what we should focus on is what's going to fix the car. Let's look at some voltages and some waveforms. And, that stuff is interesting. A lot of the theory is interesting, but doing it as a job, I'm out there, I'm fixing these cars or diagnosing these cars. It helps guide me to, what did this technician need to know to fix this or figure this out? And what can I pass on to my students is what's going to be the most relevant information. Where can we have our time best spent with their learning, so that it's not full of nice to know information and more of the, this is really important, this is really going to help you information. So I like it for that aspect too.
Yeah, that's got to be hugely, I don't know if the students that get that level of knowledge, right? Like people can teach you XYZ theory, but you're in the field and you're doing it. I hope that they appreciate that, hey, this is what we're seeing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be kind of a rare experience because you're actively doing it and you're staying up to date on things. Whereas some, I guess as long as I've been an automotive technician, like, and the people around here look at, like, we wear out our bodies, right? And so this is almost like a contingency plan to continue, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's awesome that you're actively pursuing new knowledge. You're still learning yourself. And so you're continuing on. That's cool.
Yeah. Because we've all had that instructor or that teacher that hasn't done it for 20 years or so. You can tell. And that's, I mean, not that they're a bad person or even a bad educator. It's just the material isn't focused in on what's necessarily going to help me at my job. And that's where, you hear a lot of people say, oh, well, it's a waste of time, to go to tech school or to get this education, because you're going to gain so much more from the real world, from experience, which in a way, yes, I understand where they're coming from, but I think education can be done in the right way where it is going to be really beneficial. It is going to set them up for success. So I have by no means perfected it. The class stuff is still a work in progress. I'm learning there too. But I think the real world stuff really helps. And actually some of my students will come with me when I do my mobile calls. I put my schedule up on the board and they can tag along if they want. And that's been not everybody takes advantage of that, but the ones that do, it's been a good learning experience for them. And I like having a helper too. It's always nice to have somebody to hit the key for me, Did
anybody ever teach you how to hold a flashlight? No, I got my boss's kid, Christian. He's 18. He just graduated from high school and he grew up in the shop. Mark's had the shop forever. So ever since this kid's been like 3 or 4 years old, he's been running around, always watching people do this stuff and participates and does oil changes and wrecks a car and then fixes it and does all this stuff. But he's come on as a full-time technician and he's remarkably capable, right? Like you see some people in your class, or no, not in your class, but like in the field, and you're just like, that person might not want to touch this,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
I hate to say it, there's just some people who have it, some people that might turn into a liability down the road. And, but you can tell just, he's been exposed to it so long and he has a natural capability to do this work. And he takes his time, he does good quality, and he has questions. And I try to answer them as best as I can. But there's like, I'm in the tech school group and his dad's kind of in the just let him work it out group. And I'm like, if you want him to do what I do, it's going to take more. If you want him to do, he'll learn a lot and he'll get there. It's just going to be a long slog, learning how brake systems work, how suspension systems work, and all the basics. You just need the fundamentals. And there's parts changing, then there's diagnostics, and then there's understanding. And I think he'll get a lot of the parts changing aspect of it through the shop. And he'll get bits and pieces of technology. But since I handle most of it, he doesn't get to see a lot of it. So I kind of hope that, I don't know. I've been looking into the Scanner Danner premium deal. I'm like, let's subscribe. But then I'm like, I don't know when I'll watch it with you. I don't know how I'll answer a question. Like, I want to teach him. Yeah. I want him to learn what he wants to learn.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, it's like he just jumped in full time. He's doing timing covers and all this stuff. It's just like, it's insane, dropping engines out of cars. And
that's awesome.
he's good. He's
Yep.
really good. It's just
Yep.
that school is important in my mind. So
some people really do just have a knack for it. You know, everybody's different. Everybody's got their thing, and this just clicks for some people. And you know, sometimes it's the mechanical nuts and bolts side of things, and sometimes it's the electrical and the diagnostic side of things. And that's just the way it is. Is there are going to be people where they are naturally set up for this, and that's how their brain works. But that's the cool things. We're all different. We all got our own strengths and weaknesses, and you know, we can help each other out where fall short. Again, that going back to that network thing, it's huge to have some people to reach out to when you're up against a roadblock. I'm trying to install some software. I bought an old XP laptop to run some old GM software because that's the only way it'll work. Yeah. And I'm trying to get this set up, and I'm like, I spent like 2 hours on it, and I couldn't figure out how. I've followed the instructions, and I just can't make it work. So, you know, I phone a friend and reach out, and you know, they're right there to help you out. So it's huge to have somebody in your corner where you do fall short for sure.
Oh yeah, got to build the networking. That's important.
Yeah. I was going to mention earlier, if you're able to set up, you know, you get enough people in your local area, doing one of the local technician meetups. I did one around here, and I want to do another one. I was kind of waiting till the whole COVID thing settles down, but it was really fun. It was only like 4 or 5 of us, but we had this GMC Yukon with this weird. It had aftermarket taillight and headlight assemblies in it, and there was some weird backfeeding issue that we all went through, and it was a lot of fun. So I would definitely recommend setting that up if you're able, and just getting some guys together that are passionate about it. That's a good way to spend an evening or a Saturday or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, it'd be awesome to find that locally. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many. I hope some people listen to this. I think that we need to reach out to each other. I found there's a Midwest Automotive. It's like a big group with subgroups, and there's a Des Moines group and a Kansas City group and a South Sioux Falls group and all this stuff. And I'm like, why isn't there a Omaha metropolitan area group? Like, right. It's like all around us, above us, below us, but it's just like. We missed the mark. Nobody around here is pitching for it, you know? And it's like, we need it. We need to work with each other. Like, we have a small network of European shops, and we all work together, but a lot of them didn't invest in the tooling, in the scan tools, which surprises the heck out of me. Like, how do you do this without, right? You know, I have Autoland Scientech iScan. I have AutoLogic Drive Pro Assist Plus Blue Box. I have the iScan WT, which was necessary when AutoLogic went defunct and we needed to do 722.9 transmissions. Okay. We did Farsight because Dennis, the guy at AutoLogic, went to Farsight, and we're like, "What do we do? You guys are gone." He's like, "Well, we're at Farsight now." So we bought that tablet, and then they all went back to AutoLogic. So we have this tablet that we use. I dug a DS708 out of the graveyard the other day, and I'm playing with it because it's got the old school adapters for like BMW and Mercedes, and I had a E36 BMW that had a transmission correlation fault code. Okay. It had a 5 series EC or TCU, and the shifter is pinned out differently, and so one of the switches there's 4 switches for like Prindle, like a park position or shift leverage position, and like 3 and 1 or 3 and 4. One of them was normally open, one of them was normally closed, and they were flipped. So I'm driving the car and it won't shift into fourth. It says it's commanding drive. It won't shift into fourth and won't go into lockup. And it's throwing gear ratio codes because it's supposed to be in lockup, but it's not in lockup. It's in the wrong gear. I'm like, this is the weirdest thing. And so I'd go to drive and it'd say 3, and I go to 3 and it'd say 2, and go to 2 and it'd say 1, and I go to 1 and it'd say drive. I'm like, ooh, that that manual valve is not in the right place to command drive. That's going to be a problem. So yeah, that was an interesting one. But I pulled out the DS708. I think I texted you. I was like, how do I update this thing?
Yeah.
I got in contact with somebody at the Autel group. He's like, don't update it. It's gold. I'm like, for what? He's like, it's got GM and Ford factory.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's great. I don't work on that crap. I don't care. How new can I get this thing? But I think it's like $700 or something for the year. I don't know how it works. Autel's a weird thing to me. So you subscribe for the year and you get updates? Is that the thing?
Yeah. And then you get, I don't know on the 708, but on the other stuff, you get the tool, the hardware warranted for that year as well, along with the year-long subscription.
That'd be nice.
But
yeah,
I got rid of my 708 not that long ago. It had been sitting in my spare room long enough without being touched, and I have some nostalgia around it because it was one of my favorite scan tools. But I was like, yeah, I don't really need it anymore. I'm sure I will now. I'll get one of those BMWs with a big stupid connector and not have anything, but I guess I'm not too sad to turn one of those away.
I was kind of bummed because I only had like a 5-foot. It comes with like a 5-foot cord. I'm like, that's useless. Do you know where that connector is? It's under the hood. Right. And so I'm driving this car around, and I have the only place I could get it was like it was sitting on the armrest, and it was like bungeed up. And I'm like, this is terrible. So I'm like trying to read the values from across the car because the cord barely reaches the window. So I'm on Amazon that night, like 15-pin serial, female to female. I want a 15-footer, and I found them, but I was like, this is useless. I'm not gonna need this. So I canned the whole idea. But it's like, how do I get more length out of this? I want an OBD2 port extender because none of our tools are wireless. And so I'll be at the back, like trying to calibrate or trying to figure out why a tailgate isn't calibrating. It's like run to the front, hit the buttons, run to the back. Like, I need an OBD2 extension cord, and I'm sure it's out there. I just haven't done it.
They are out there. I know a lot of programmer guys they have a long cord, so they'll plug into the vehicle, and then they'll just do it in the back of their van. They have all the laptops and scan tools set up in their van, so they're not even in the vehicle. They're just hanging out in whether it be the AC or the heat or whatever.
There's some cars that'd be really nice. I don't want to be in them.
yeah, no kidding. Hot summer day and full of who knows what in the vehicle. That can get pretty nasty.
I had an SLK that they had left the driver's side window. Like the guy brought it in. He wasn't the owner. He's like, this customer wanted us to paint this dashboard pink. I'm like, no, don't paint that dashboard pink. That's a terrible idea. He's like, well, it doesn't start now. And they had left the driver's side window down. The windshield had been broken. All the wheels, all the tires were flat. The thing was just a mess. Man, it was a mess. And I got in it, and there was black mold growing on the seats. I'm just like, I'm not trying to be a bummer. And if anybody's going to figure this out, like, I'll give it the shot, but I ain't touching this thing.
Right.
I can't breathe that stuff in. I can't be, and maybe I'm a wuss. I don't know. But like,
it's not good for you.
It ain't. You get in it and you start feeling it. Like I felt it almost instantly. I'm like, it was a hot day. That stuff's festering in there. It had rained recently, so the carpets are all wet, and it's just like, it's humid, and it's like hits your lungs. You're like, nope, nope, I'm out. And like I tried the COVID mask thing. I'm like, these are ineffective. Like, I'm not wearing this thing. Why not? Well, I can still, no mold gets through it. I know for a fact. No, I did. I obeyed all the laws, did all the rules and stuff. But man, it's been that car sucked. I don't want to be in it. Yeah, that'd be cool. And the other thing, my dad was a locksmith, and he did. We teased the idea for a minute about me being a locksmith, but also a diagnostician, which I think would be super powerful. Because they would go to him and they're like, we need keys. Why do you need keys? We just need keys. Why doesn't the car start? It's like, that problem was there before we even got here.
Yeah.
And now you're mad at us because we made keys to this car and it doesn't start. Sure. That's not our fault. That's your fault. You didn't provide us enough information.
I gotta imagine that happens all the time.
I mean, I guess you use it more for the Ford stuff where you need 2 keys to program ECUs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you
I do some keys. Yeah, I'm just getting into it just now. But yeah, there's definitely situations like that where they're trying to fix the car by adding keys to it, and that wasn't the reason why it wasn't starting. But yeah, being able to shift gears once something doesn't work, that's huge.
That'd be a powerful, powerful business model. Now, unfortunately, don't get the opportunity to do that, but, you know, it's still doing the diagnostics. But if those 2 things are wrapped up together, I think that would be a huge business model because you're mobile already. If you're programming keys, then you've already got the substructure for some module programming. Like when he was doing it, I've got, I don't even know the names of them, but I have like, when I cleaned out his garage after he passed away, I ended up with a Nissan Connect 2. I have GM Tech 2s. I have like 4 or 5 factory kits. I don't know what to do with them. I don't know. That's one of those things where I put it in the corner of the garage and I just don't want to think about it. Someday I'll get to it, but it's like, it's just sad that he had so much stuff going on and he was so good at what he did. And he encouraged so many people that we lost him. And just that, what would you do with that? You know, just a missed opportunity to do work with someone. You know, if anybody's listening and you have an opportunity to be with somebody you want to be with, go for it. Like, if you're looking back at the end of the day, like my whole thing was always financially driven. I'm like, I can't make that little money. And it wasn't that big of a jump. It'd be a bigger jump now down to go do it. But if it's in that realm, like the satisfaction you'll get with spending time with somebody is just, you can't replace it. You know, it's infinitely valuable. And what I would have learned from him, you know, he was in the locksmithing community. He was good. He was really good. And sorry, I'm trailing here.
You're good.
So when somebody has that much passion for what they do and they can instill that passion in somebody else, you know, they have so much to offer for like lessons. And what I would have liked to do is like, he was set up to program cars, program keys remotely. So he had the van, he had the power inverter. He did his due diligence on making sure battery voltage was perfect, you know, and that was his passion. He's like, these guys are going out with a JLB 600 and hitting it with this jump pack, and I hope it programs. It's like, is the jump pack even charged? Like, that's going to be a problem. So he would go out there and he'd have like a power inverter hooked up, or he'd have power supply power, you know, and he's programming Nissan Prox keys, and they're really touchy to that stuff. But if you just add like an Autel to that, how powerful would it be? Hey, this doesn't start. I noticed this is the problem. You know, I did a quick report and I saw this, and this, or I can't talk to these 4 modules. Do you want to see why the CAN bus isn't working? You know, that would be an amazing crossover. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, that's really good advice for anybody too, is to, you never know, once, you know, you're not going to have that opportunity, you know, to be with people that you care about. So take advantage as much as possible whenever you can.
Yeah. Sure. People we can't replace, you know, and, you know, long term, you know, it would have been like a $30,000 hit, you know, which isn't over 5 years or 6 years or whatever. You know, if we got good at it, who knows how much we could have made. But it was just like, just thinking about it. And he did some tax stuff. He wasn't filing his taxes. He's getting paid cash, which is really easy in that kind of a business.
Sure.
And I couldn't ethically get involved at that point, but he went legit. He filed with the IRS. He did everything. He got fixed up. He was in the clear, you know.
Okay.
It could have been bad, but he got it taken care of. But yeah, at that point, that opportunity was just like, it's a little bit of a pay cut, but I would take it in a heartbeat now. But yeah, that's been an interesting couple years. Yeah, but networking, you know, I think it was so cool that I was able to just come up to Minnesota that weekend and Hail Mary throw. Hey, guy, I know you don't know me, and
Yeah.
I'm not nobody in this market. But hey, let's meet up.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
cool. It's a random message. Hey, I'm up here for a hockey tournament, and it's real close to where I live. I was like, oh yeah, let's go grab a beer and some food.
That was a good time.
That was cool. And yeah, how did your son end up doing in the tournament?
They got smoked.
Oh, okay.
So Minnesota hockey, man, you guys are good. The thing about it is that we learned during the tournament. So your age cutoff is like July 1st. Correct me if I'm wrong. For like high school teams. Oh, okay.
Not 100% sure, but that's probably right.
So what was explained to me was that there's a cutoff for ages for July 1st, and this provides the opportunity for the children to compete with people in their age group, not their age group, but their grade, right? So you can keep these kids together through almost like an academy style idea to the team infrastructure.
Sure.
So we're a January 1st age group, and we're a 2011 team or 2012 team. So all of our kids are 9.
Gotcha.
So we went up to Minnesota, and the age difference, our oldest kid could have had the possibility of being 18 months younger than their oldest kid.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so, especially at that age.
Yeah, the kids we were playing against are huge, but the kids have heart, man. We have a couple smaller kids playing just for their age group. You know, they have a shorter stature and they're fast. And they have heart, and they're going in there. These kids are towering at like 1.5 feet, 2 feet above these kids, and they're just in there in the corner fighting for the puck. I'm like, go, go, go.
That's awesome.
So I'm super excited for next year. My son is the goalie. He's had to develop a lot of mental fortitude. Yeah. When you're a goalie, it's just hard.
Yes.
And so I'm super proud of him for that. But he came to me this year and he's like, I want to be a player next year. And it's just, I bring anybody who knows me, if anybody even listens to this, I don't think so. But like everybody's like, I talk about it all the time because I'm shattered. I had a kid that played goalie and it changed the way I watch hockey. My ideal hockey game would be 100 shots on net. The goalie saved every single one of them with like a windmill, flurry stack the pads thing. And it goes into a double overtime, into a shootout where they're 10 deep. And it's like, I just don't want to see anybody score anymore. I'm cheering for the other kid's goalie. I'm cheering for my kid. I'm cheering for, so Easton is my son, and then Jackson's his goalie mate. So they switch off every other game, so they both get equal ice time. And just the bonding that they've got, they're just good kids. They just want to play together. So even though they get trashed, it's like, just wait. You're 9 years old playing against 10 and 11-year-old kids, and you're hanging. It's not like 30-0. It's like 4-0, 3-1. It's like, it's close. Yeah. And these are Minnesota kids. They have a huge talent pool. We're from Omaha, Nebraska. We got a lot of kids, and the program's growing. I don't want to knock it, but like it's grown hugely. And just since I played high school, like high school had just become a lettering sport, like 06 or 07 ish. And now we have high schools with multiple teams.
That's awesome.
And it's just grown. So it's exciting. Yeah, they got their butts handed to them. But we went to Fargo 2 weeks ago. Same scenario. A lot of Minnesota teams up there too.
Okay.
So if I remember correctly, you started later, right?
Yeah.
You were in your 20s or something?
Yeah, I didn't start skating until I was 25. Just to have fun with some buddies, and ended up falling in love with it. And it's going on a little over 10 years now that I've been skating. And I definitely at that age you hit your plateau pretty quickly, but it's so much fun. I just played last night actually, and it's a blast. Not only to get away from everything, you get some physical exercise, but you get to see, for me, I play with 3-4 of my real close friends, and it's just good to have an excuse to hang out because everybody's so busy with their lives and everything that's going on, and you get a couple hours to skate around and maybe win and have a couple beers, and it's really great. I've enjoyed it a lot. I wish I would have played when I was younger, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I played when I was 6. Like, my mom got me a set of roller skates and put me in. I had an asphalt driveway with a bunch of rocks. So it was a rock driveway up to an asphalt driveway. So she gave me a pair of roller skates, like, go skate outside. I'm like, that's a terrible idea. I'm 6 years old, and I'm like, this is going to hurt. I don't know how this is going to hurt. I went out there, ate dirt so many times. Yeah. But I started with YMCA roller hockey, which is just ball hockey in like a gym. And that was like, it was interesting. And then I tried out for like a roller hockey team, like a travel roller hockey team. Well, I had I was decently quick. I was keeping up with the other kids, which, thinking back on it, I'm pretty impressed with. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I had the adjustable boot rollerblade brand plastic skates with the little sleeve that goes in them that they give to kids. So they have brakes on them. So I try out, and the coach goes, you can make the team, but you can't have brakes. And I'm like, what? He's like, you have to have hockey skates. You can't skate in those things. And I'm like, well, I was keeping up just fine. And he's like, yeah, that's pretty ridiculous, but you can't use those skates. And so I don't think I did it the first year. And I went and tried out again, and I made it. My grandma's like, they're going to let you play B team with brakes. I'm like, sweet, I got this. I think it was like around, so my birthday's in September. So right around the beginning of the season, my grandma took me to, I can't remember what hockey, it wasn't a Sports Authority. Sorry. It was just a sports store. And I bought a set of Mission high-low, I can't remember the name of them, but it was my first pair of hockey skates. And it was like, this is legit. And maybe a bit of my fascination for mechanical stuff comes from roller hockey skates are mechanical. They have bearings, and they have wheels, and they have durometer of rubber, and they have diameter of wheels and all this stuff. And so I would sit after the hockey games when we were traveling. I made the team, skating, doing all the stuff. I end up being, as I remember it, we did like a time trials deal. And I ended up being the fastest kid on the team. Nice. And then they threw the time trials out, like as a grading structure. So I didn't get points or whatever. But I was booking. But I went to the hockey store, and I'm like, I want ABEC 9s, because that's how many ball bearing elements are in the ball bearing. And so I'm like, I want ABEC 9s because they're freer moving. He's like, you don't weigh enough to get. I'm like, come on, guy. But I got these bearings. I'd take the shields off the sides of them, and I'd clean them out. And I'd use citrus cleaner, and I'd clean them out, and I'd put the super light oil in it instead of the grease. And I'd do this after every day I was on a tournament. I'd take them out. And it's weird because you play on concrete, you play on dance floors, you play on wood, you play on tile. And so I had a whole bag of wheels. I'm changing the durometer for the playing surface. It was a bit OCD, but it was so much fun. And then our roller hockey team went defunct, and I had to play on ice, and that was a huge change. But then, so I'm playing high school. I've never checked in my life. I've been a finesse player. We couldn't check in roller, so you just learn to get around kids. Well, you can't get around a kid when he weighs 3 times as much as you. He's 2 feet taller than you, and he's just gonna just rolls you over. It's like, that hurt. So yeah, played high school for a conglomerate team. We sucked. It was really bad, but met my wife on the team. Oh, nice. So hockey's been just central to a lot of life lessons, a lot of memories, a lot of learning experiences. Yeah. So, yeah. And so married for almost 12 years now, 3 That's kids, awesome. A house, all from a hockey team. It's cool.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely some life lessons to be learned playing, and I found it kind of it helps you and other people to maybe even identify some character flaws, while you're playing the game, and you can hopefully work on that and develop as a person too, because it's very it's very objective, right? Like you either scored a goal or you didn't, or you win or you lose, and you gotta be able to deal with that and move on. Yeah, it's fantastic. That's cool to hear, though. I like that.
Yeah, seeing our 9-year-olds learn all those experiences, learn passing. Like, you can't just put your head down and skate through everybody. It's not going to work anymore.
Right, teamwork.
I felt so bad last week. I was in North Dakota. We went 9-0 and 9-0 in the first 2 games. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to be bad. Like, they're going to get a false bravado going. Went into our 3rd game. We're playing a Minnesota team. I think it was Roseville. Is that between St. Louis? No, not St. Louis. That's
There's
what are the
St.
2
Louis
cities?
Park.
Minneapolis and...
Yeah, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Roseville
St. Paul.
is just north the Minneapolis side.
Isn't it kind of in the middle of the 2, though?
It is closer to the middle, yep.
So we're playing this team, and I feel I'm a heel. So I have a goalie kid, and anytime somebody cheers, I get testy because I'm like, that's a 9-year-old. You're hurting his feelings. Not that. I mean, that's part of the thing. So it's a learning experience, Ignore what other people are thinking. They don't matter, So this kid's playing goalie, and he's trying so hard, but his team is just letting him down. We got some kids just skating in, and he's about the same stature as my son. The middle of his head touches the crossbar. So they use full-size nets. And so there's these mailbox slot tokens above their shoulders. Where if you can shoot it top shelf, it's almost a guaranteed save because you can't reach,
Yeah.
My son got creative one time and he jumped, and that was interesting because it was during a shootout and the kid wasn't expecting it. So he's coming down and my son's all hunched over, and then he just leaps in the air, square in the chest.
Nice.
Ends the game. It's like, oh, that's so good. So this goalie's trying so hard. He's doing a great job. His team's letting him down. And I didn't know at the time, but on the other side of the ice, I was on their end. So they were down. They were here. They were down on the other side on our zone, when you switched between periods. And he's back on our side. Well, our kids were connecting. They were doing 3 pass entrances to the zone. And I'm just like, shoot it, Camo, or shoot it, Kyler. And it's just like, oh, these kids are getting it. It's clicking. That goalie's dad was in front of me.
Oh, no.
I didn't know it, but he was already shattered. I say shattered. These kids, they're so resilient, but they're also so fragile. So, I see it in my son, and thank God that we have 2 goalies, because somebody gets up 6-0 on you or 6-1 on you, you need a reprieve. That's a lot of abuse to take mentally and physically for one person. So we have 2. This kid had no reserve, and they only had 10 players on the bench. And it's like, that's not a lot. We bring 17 kids, 2 goalies, 3 lines. And this kid was shattered on the other end of the ice, and I didn't know this. He had already cried once. And I'm sitting here cheering for our kids because I think they're doing a great job. And this goalie's dad is in front of me, and we get our 8th goal, and I just lock up. I'm like, oh no, I'm that parent today. I am that jerk that cheered at the wrong time, inappropriate time. We're up 8-0. There's no pride in this anymore. Right. It's just numbers. And I felt so bad. I didn't know how to conduct myself. The dad was walking up the stairs. I was at the top, and I'm just like, dude, he played great. He tried so hard. And I said I'm sorry for myself, but it came across as I was sorry that we beat you so bad, and that's not what I was trying to do. Oh, okay. And I'm just I am such a heel, and I felt bad. But there's a certain reserve that parents need to have, and at that moment, most of the time I got it, but I didn't have it, and I just embarrassed myself. That kid played great though. He had heart. He stayed in it the whole game, even though he was he was mentally out of it. I'm like, good on you for staying in,
Right, exactly.
But, that's such a hard thing.
For sure. Well, hey, dude, we just did 2 hours like that.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good. It did not feel like 2 hours. I enjoyed that.
No, it's like I said, there's not a lot of outlet, so this is awesome. the podcast you put on it's great. I listen to it, and you got so many. It's cool to hear. Like I think I listened to Ivan's like 2 or 3 times because there's certain nuances that I wasn't catching on, and like the Auto Body guys released one today. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna listen to that. And so I'm trying to I'm saturated right now in all the podcasts. So I appreciate you putting this on. It's cool. I hope the 2% of people that are in it, they're in it. Like this group of guys, this is it. We all need to get together. Everybody needs to reach out. Talk to somebody. If you got a passion for this, make it known. Talk to those people around you that are doing this stuff, because just like training, like every single one of these conversations is rejuvenation, is like energy for the spirit, right? Like we get beat down so much on time, money, cars. You couldn't fix that in this amount of time. It's like, just stop. We're doing the best we can, and this is just awesome. So putting this together is just amazing, and we all appreciate you for it, because it gives us that outlet, so it's cool. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate everybody listening, and I thank you for spending your time with me this evening.
This is great, man.
All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. I want to give Chase one more big thank you for spending some time with me here. Really enjoyed that talk. Hopefully you did as well. Also want to thank everybody out there for listening and all the feedback I've been getting about the show. But with that all out of the way, let's all get out there and start fixing the world one car at a time.